Now going to introduce Peter Horn.
Thank you. That was a short introduction. Thank you. No short jokes, please. So yeah, I think a lot of you probably know me, Peter Horn. I do work for NI, but Steve told me I was only allowed to present as long as it wasn't anything NI wanted me to present, so that's why I've not got the NI slide background. I also didn't want to be the only person here with the NI slide template. So I've talked about the Assert API a lot over the last few years. I thought rather than talking about what it is and why anyone should use it, I would kind of use this as an opportunity to open up some of the places where I'm kind of not maybe so sure about what I've done in there, and just kind of see if there's any better ideas on how to do things and have a bit of a discussion. I guess that's kind of a long-winded way of saying I've only got 12 slides. If you guys don't talk, this could be quite short. So first of all, I just wanted to start off with our giants are female. So Danielle George, she's a professor of RF engineering at the University of Manchester and has worked her way up to be vice dean. She's vice president on the board of trustees of the IET. I think she's due to take over the presidency in 2021 or something like that. I think I first came across her when she presented the Royal Institute Christmas lectures in 2014, and she did some pretty cool things like turn the Shell building in London into a giant Tetris board and loads of other cool experiments that day. And Sash was lucky enough to attend the lectures and help us set up some of the experiments and stuff. So a lot of them were based on NI tools. But yeah, she's doing a lot of really cool stuff to kind of inspire the next generation and help with getting people who aren't necessarily in the traditional science and academic community interested in cool scientific experiments. So yeah, thought that was pretty cool. Also, Sasha, is she the one that gaffer taped you to a chair and locked you in a dark room?
That's, yes.
Anyone wants to know the details of that, then buy Sasha beer tonight and I'm sure I'll tell you all about it. So, what is the Assert API? I first came across the Assert in this book, Code Complete. The idea behind an assert is it's a predicate or a true-false statement. You put in your program, indicate that you think that a certain condition is true at that place. And if that turns out to be false at runtime, it means there's a bug in your code. It's not that an error's happened because a file wasn't there or something simple's gone wrong. It means there is actually a bug and you need to go and fix that. So I think they're quite a powerful idea and something that can be very useful. One sort of slide point I wanted to mention. I think I should start getting commissioned for this book because I've mentioned this in a few presentations and loads of people have come up to me and said that they've kind of bought a copy of it since talking to me. Nancy, I know James and...
Commenting on credit goes to Chris Ralph. It's the first place I heard about it.
Okay. I don't get the commission.
That goes back like 15 years ago.
Oh yeah, it's an old
20.
book, I know that. But yeah, loads of people have said that they've since bought it and it's an amazing book and it's not exactly nice bedtime reading, it's like 700 pages long or something, but definitely if you want to learn lots about good computer programming best practices and stuff, that's a really good thing to read. So it's also, the Assert API is also just a library that I wrote to release into the community. It's on GitHub if you want to download it, bugs and all, then you can do. It is full of holes, compromises, things I wish I'd done better. Hopefully there's the odd decent bit of code in there. But yeah, there's definitely a load of things in there that I'm kind of not too sure about. One of which is in this presentation, and I just sitting down about 10 minutes ago, I think I may have had a light bulb moment of why the hell didn't I do it that way? So yeah, when we get to that slide, I'll mention that. So moving on to the first sort of problem that I came across. We've got all these while loops in our application, and the idea is I can just place all these assert VIs down, and I wanted to have a way of being able to view those asserts. It's quite a big screen, actually. That's quite small, but okay. The asserts all need to send data to this user interface that is used to sort of view all of that data. I wanted to make it so that you could, well, I had a few requirements for how I wanted this to perform. So I wanted to be able to start and stop that user interface independently of all the asserts, because, like I say, the asserts should be there. They should flag up if they fail. They probably should, well, depending on how you have them configured, they possibly should abort the application or do log to a file or whatever. But I wanted to have a user interface that you could view all the information on if you wanted, but that was kind of not necessarily, didn't have to be there in order for the API to work. So I wanted both the asserts and the UI to be able to kind of start up, shut down independently, and if you started one up before the other, then they would all still communicate properly. I also wanted very minimal performance impact on the VI under test. I didn't want the asserts to kind of log an assert, then spend 5 seconds sending a bit of information over, realize that this isn't actually active, and then carry on with the application, because that would just completely screw up your application and probably would make the API unacceptable. So bidirectional communications. I wanted the ability to be able to change how the asserts behave in terms of what happens when an assert fails from the user interface, but I didn't want the asserts to wait at all on that action. So that's a slightly complicated list of requirements, I know. So what I tried to do is got an assert. Inside each of the assert VIs, there's this log assert core, I think it's called. There's a VI that goes around this and wraps and configures it to be the specific assert with a load of information. That's done with a load of scripting. When you build a new assert, then it scripts a load of constants inside the wrapper VI around this, tells it what the assert name is, what the caller is, and other bits and pieces. And essentially that's all bundled into this assert messaging cluster over on the left, which is then converted into a string, and then I've got a user event in an FGV there, which I only need one user event, so I just wrapped it in FGV so that I could just send all the information over. And then it is an active framework application, the UI, so it sends a message into the user event into the active framework via this user event. I didn't want to pass the active queue around for that because I don't like doing that. I might get shouted at by Alan for doing this in a minute, but we'll see. When that message comes in, it logs, converts it back to the cluster of information, and then logs that inside the private data of this display VI. And then the next step is that at some period, which you can define this independently, so say you've set it up to every second you want to update the user interface, it pulls out all of the information about which asserts are currently active and displays that on the front panel. Does that make sense how that's all fitting together? You'll kind of look a bit stunned. Does anyone see any big holes in what I've done there? I guess I'm waiting for Alan mainly to kind of pull it apart and how I've used the active framework. I guess, yeah, the main things I was unsure about is, should I have used a different method of getting the assert information into the API in the first place, or is using a user event like that okay?
Is your actor it's just that one UI, right?
It calls a couple of other actors, but that's kind of the entry point into it.
Well, I mean, you're merging some actor framework code into a different system, and so you sort of definitionally break a bunch of rules to make that work. And that's fine. I mean, there's a time to break the rules, and that's it. I'm not quite following what you're doing here, so but I don't want to hold you up, so maybe we should take it offline.
Okay.
If you want me to look at it, I can.
Okay, can do.
Or we can come back to it at the end if you find that you've gone through your slides.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, that was the first thing that I was kind of slightly unsure about. The other bit part of what made me do some of these decisions was what's happening in these two VIs at the front of the assert core. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to be able to pass information back from my Assert user interface back into the Asserts. The Assert user interface is an active framework, or it's an active core VI. I don't know what all of those asserts are logged in. They could be active framework VIs, they could be DQMH, they could be in no framework whatsoever, just a random piece of LabVIEW code. So I decided to do, first of all, have each of those, have this kind of a big FGV, which for each of those asserts creates a new user event. The main communication piece of information I want is what happens if that assert fails. So that's why it's called a failure action change event. And if I basically storing all of those in a variant lookup table, if one of those, and I'm storing that by the assert VI user identifier, which I'm getting when I script the VI. So I'm using that to identify the user event in the variant lookup. If that one doesn't exist, then I'll create a new one. If it does, then I'll just use the existing one. I had a bit of a code review with Fab a few months ago, and Fab mentioned to me, like, is it a good idea to just create hundreds of these user event references without any management? Should I not sort of, if a VI goes out of memory, should I shut it down or something like that? So I had thought about that previously, and it was kind of one of those things of, I'll get to that later, maybe I'll think about that, but had never got around to it. So after talking to Fab, I did a bit of testing, and I created 200,000 assert identifier user events. And this is my sort of testing graph on the top here. So I think over the course of about 15 minutes, created 200,000 event references. And basically I think my RAM increased from 5.2 gigs to 5.6, and my CPU basically stayed pretty much flat, increased a little bit, but then as soon as it stopped actually creating the events, you can see, where's my cursor? I think one of those, top right where the graph goes down, that coincides exactly with where my I stopped creating the events. So I was like, it's not that much of an overhead, it's fine. But yeah, that works okay. So the reason I wanted to talk about that, that's how I create the user event for each of the asserts. Pass that over to the next VI, and then I'm using a single element queue to store what the current action is. So it'll start with a default action, which is defined when I script the VI. And then when each time I come around, it'll look in that queue. If that queue's got an existing element in there, it'll start off trying to use that. And then from then on, it'll basically look at the user event. If there's a new event in that queue, so if this user event here has got a 0 millisecond timeout, that'll immediately time out if there's nothing in the queue. So the assert doesn't wait, but if there's something there, then it will use that, and it will update the failure action in the cluster and put it back in the queue so that that gets used for the next time. Which made sense to me when I did it. Does it make sense to you guys? Richard? Do you want to?
Maybe I've misunderstood. So your assert generates a user event which is sent off to the UI, which is hopefully listening, and then the UI has the ability to send a reply, but by that point the assert's moved on because it's on a 0 timeout. So it gets that reply the second time around?
Yes. Well, the next time the assert is called.
The next time it's called. So that reply can't be, obviously you can't wait on it because you don't want your API to wait. So what kind of replies do you send back that are useful when you get them the next time around?
The only data I'm sending back to the asserts is what to do if the assert fails. So I think I've got 4 options in there. Do nothing except for display it on the UI, log to file, pause the application, or abort the application.
Why can't you just have
So when you build the assert, there's a default that you configure there. This is for if you want to change it later on. Okay. Sam, did you have a question?
Maybe I just don't understand. What is the point of the single element queue? Sorry, maybe I just missed something, but what is the point of the single element queue? Could you not just keep it in the cluster, or is that not?
A single element queue is like a DVR.
Oh,
it can be named.
Okay. I think I get it now.
Yeah.
It needs to be accessed from two different areas. So that's why he's using it. And it needs to be accessed from two different places, different code. So he could have done it with a DVR, but a DVR cannot be named. So then he would have to pass the reference somehow. So he's using a single element queue so he can use the same name and obtain it in both places.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, I just remembered the other thing is I don't know what this assert VI is being called in, so I can't pass data out and sort of have a requirement this needs to be put into a shift register and maintained. I need to have a memory space that it would store it in within there. Okay.
Just a question about that single element queue. You're not destroying that queue reference anywhere. Is that not a memory leak here?
Yeah, again, just like the user event reference that I'm creating hundreds of these user event references and I guess hundreds of these single element queue references. I guess that in the single element queues probably contributed to this graph here as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it is a memory leak, but it's not one that it doesn't seem to be a massively significant one, and I haven't yet figured out a way of optimizing that out to make it. Right, you're going to need the single element queue reference until that VI goes out of memory, obviously. So it's only a leak at that point.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
But
Pete,
yes.
surely, well, so again, there may be other reasons for this, but if you made this VI re-entrant, so
Yep.
every assert instance has its own copy, could you not just then use a feedback node or a shift or a FGV style structure within this VI itself?
yes. I think I could, yeah. That's the feedback I was looking for. Yeah.
That would go to hell if you had a, it's not shared, it's the, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the type of reentrant. Yeah, the pre-allocated, thank you. If it's pre-allocated inside of a shared clone, it will get very weird on you very quickly. Because, you may think you have 8 threads, but because of the shared clone, LabVIEW's pretty sure can do it in 3. And so your data in your pre-allocated inside the shared is going to be not what you think it is. If you did it with like a single point averager, you would find that you were averaging data from several of your threads because those are the ones that use the same shared clone.
But if you have a whole stack, simple re-entrant, then it wouldn't have that problem.
Right, but can he guarantee that?
The other thing to do is try and use a queue, and if you have an error, that means the queue doesn't exist, create one, and then so you try to reuse the same one. Does that work? Would that work? You might be a problem with shared reentrant clones.
Yeah, there will be.
So this is more robust, so.
Great. So Peter, also, it's really simple. You can destroy this queue. All you have to do is create another one, and you get one more reference to the exact same queue, and then you just destroy the queue. So, destroying all of the queues is quite simple if you get to the point where you need it to, right?
Yeah. Yeah. As long as I know all the names of the queues, I guess, because they've all got individual names, and I don't know what all these names are ahead of time. But, yeah.
Sorry, just a comment on that, destroying the queue and obtaining it again and making it for new. If you destroy it and move it out of memory, it takes quite a lot extra time to recreate the queue instead of just acquiring a new reference to the same queue. So you get worse performance in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I didn't want to destroy the queue at this point, but I didn't want to have a kind of some alternative. I did think about having an input to this VI that said, do you want to destroy the queue reference, or do you want to destroy all references, and have that kind of exposed out to the user? But I think I decided not to do that. But yeah, I can't remember why. Petru, do you have?
Hi, Pete. So I've got two questions. One is, if I understand correctly, you will have a bunch of Assert API calls in a bunch of sub-VIs in your project. What happens with those Assert API calls when you built your project into an executable? Do you just leave them there and they exist in the code you deploy to your customer, or is it best to strip them out first?
So at the moment, within the wrapper VI, the template VI that goes around this, there's a conditional disable structure, and then you can basically just turn all the asserts on or turn them off. I think what I should do, instead of putting that inside the sub VI, is put the sub VI down on the block diagram and then wrap that in a conditional disable, which will take up a bit more block diagram space on the calling block diagram, but means that you don't have to distribute any of these assert VIs, even if they're not doing anything inside them. But yeah, I haven't got around to implementing that yet.
And a second question is, I found myself using a sub-VI I created for myself, which I called raise program flow error VI. So it's a very basic sub-VI which simply raises a custom error. And I place that sub-VI in cases that should never execute. Just like you said, if they execute, that it means there's a bug upstream. And obviously, this approach is much simpler than using the Assert API and doesn't have the ability to log to file, for example. So it's a much cruder approach. Do you recommend using this simpler approach in some instances and using the more evolved Assert API in a larger application or in other instances?
It's kind of, I guess, it's a bit of a difficult question to answer. I do the same thing with kind of case structures and cases that are never supposed to execute and things. I would probably say if it's a simple application that you're just, like a simple library that you're just building, and it's only a few VIs or something, then it's probably easy enough to debug, and maybe using the Assert API isn't that good. I think the place where this type of thing it could be quite useful is if you're building libraries and kind of you build, 20 different libraries to do different things, and then there's a library that you built 6 months ago or something, you've forgotten about it, and it's all unit tested and everything, and you think it works perfectly, and then suddenly some interaction with 5 of those other libraries or something causes some completely random unknown bug. Hopefully the Assert API should flag that up, whereas kind of simpler debugging methods may not. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that's probably slightly more complex, but potentially could be some benefit further down the line. Alan? There's Mike behind you.
I'm playing catch up here. So upper left, that is your Assert VI. That's the thing you're dropping through your code wherever it needs to go. Is that correct?
Yeah, that gets wrapped in another VI, but that's the Assert API.
Okay, so what
core.
gets passed into that? What are you triggering on?
There's in that cluster assert messaging is just it's quite a big cluster with things like the assert name, the time it was created,
and that's provided by your wrapper VI?
That's provided by the scripting VIs, that when you build the assert, it gets the data type and provides all that information.
So what are you triggering on when you're sending this assert?
You just drop it down in your code on a wire.
Okay.
So when it
it's evaluating something, and I'm not clear on what it's evaluating. That's my problem. And I'm sure it's me, not you.
Yeah, I can show you that easily enough.
It can be later if you want.
Do it offline maybe, but I can show you how that's working, certainly. Okay. So, was there any more questions about this bit, by the way? Nope. Cool. So the next bit, this is the one that I think I've figured out what I should have done, and I'm not sure why I didn't. 100% sure why I didn't do it. I think I know why I didn't do it, but not sure why I didn't realise I was wrong when I thought that. So, inside my event structure, whenever I want to update the UI, I mentioned that it's update. You can set it to update once a second, once a minute, however often you want it to update. I didn't want it to be just updating every time an assert got updated, because you might have it in quite a high-speed application. Your asserts might be updating 1,000 times a second. Updating the UI is quite a lengthy process. There's redoes a table, and it's a bit of a pain. So I didn't want to try and do that 1,000 times a second. So I wanted to decouple that. So inside the this event structure here gets triggered, which is what updates the front panel. Inside there, it goes in, gets all of the current UI information, all of the colors that I want to change the cells to, all of the item names and everything, and uses list box properties to change everything. First of all, the names, and then colors all the rows in that need to be either red or green, and then colors all the other cells white. And that works fine. And then inside those, I'm basically just going and changing the active cell and going through this for loop, which feels a bit horrible going around this for loop tons and tons of times. The reason I'm kind of I don't like this bit here is because I don't like having all this long-running property node modification and stuff. Even though I've got defer front panel updates set to true and then false before and after the sub-VI, I don't like having it in that user event structure at the top. It should be, I feel, in some kind of, either in a method VI or in some helper loop or something, so that it's not causing delays and things to the rest of the Active Framework application. The reason that I put it there was because those two, the array of numerics and the array of strings that get passed out from the sub-VI, they're storing all the information about what asserts are currently active in the table. And then when I right-click on one of those asserts to send the information to, or to change the failure action, or a bunch of other stuff that I've got in a right-click menu there, I need to know which assert is actually referring to, and therefore in that event structure I needed that information. And the event structure for right-click menus throw a bit of a hissy fit if you try and pass the reference for that menu over to another loop, and then the event itself finishes. The event dies, or the reference dies. So I wanted to keep it all in that loop. What I think I should have done is just passed all the information down to the act core, done it in private data there, and then just pass the row that I'm pointing to down to the method as well, and I'd have all the data there. So yeah, as I say, I think I've solved that one, but it's a bit of a mess. But is there a better way, by the way, of if I'm recoloring loads of rows like this? Is that the way that everyone does it, or you got a better way?
Like -1, I think it's like -1 or -2 as the row or column. Then you can set it to either just change the color or just change an entire row. So basically you can fill the entire table as white and then just update the ones that you need to change to a different color.
I didn't know that. That would be handy. John.
Something else to consider, if you've got literally thousands of these perhaps in your UI and updating that multi-column list box takes a long time, you could revert to just showing a portion of the data, as in the size that you can see. And James Powell has a very good example of using MySQL to dynamically pull data out of a database, just a memory database. So if you've got them all in RAM, you just pull out the bit that you're looking at.
And we've even launched a slider on the side of it, and then you remove the slider, you launch a vertical slider, and fool it into thinking it's actually the same thing, taking the slider. But it's not. It's just showing you the next 10, the next 10, the next 10.
Okay.
And that's, no, I stole that.
I think you can select all rows and headers, all rows and all columns and headers, or all rows and their corresponding headers, but you can't select all just row content fields. You've always got to select either the headers or the headers and the content. So it's really, if you want to have separate header fields and things and change the colours, it can get a bit annoying trying to do all of them at once. For some reason, that feature's just not there.
I would defer the panel updates before.
That feature is on the ID exchange.
That's in the sub-VI.
I've posted it.
Sorry, what was the comment there? Didn't catch.
The idea to have -3, for example, to just select all the rows instead of the rows and the header.
Okay.
Because now, if it's -2, you get everything, including the header, which you don't want to change. So you have to do 2 operations.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I forgot to mention in the little sub VI, you can't really read the text on it. Just before the VI and under the arrow over there, I'm turning defer from panel updates on and off, so that I'm not doing this loads and loads. Too much anyway. Okay, so next up is scripting, which I can probably modify a load of this scripting based on stuff that I learned this morning, which was awesome. I've been wondering about trying to change some of this to use malleable VIs. I think I asked Stephen Mercer at the CLA Summit a year or two ago when he was talking about scripting, or he was talking about malleable VIs. And I asked him, could I script malleable VIs? And I think his words were, no, I don't think that's a good idea, and if you can, I'm fairly sure I'm going to go back and turn it off as a possibility now. So
don't tell him.
Yeah. So I haven't actually tried doing it, but maybe it's not possible. But basically, there's loads of places in my scripting code where I have tons of different cases for all the different data types. So I'm getting the data type when I right-click on the wire or select a wire to add in an assert. I find the data type and I store that in the private data. And then there's loads of places where I need to do different types of operations depending on what that is. So I've been trying to figure out how to easily make that a bit more manageable, because I ended up with tons of different cases all doing fairly similar operations. Haven't figured that one out yet, but I ended up with VIs like this as well, which I was, not great. But so in basically this sub VI, there's all these sub VIs. A lot of them are repeated. I've got this change diagram constant value, which just goes in, finds a block diagram item or block diagram constant by its label, and then changes its value. And you can see I'm using that all through this sub VI tons. And yeah, there's this case structure on the right again that has got lots of different operations or lots of different options, one for each of those data types. And then within that, there is, for all of the numerical data types, there's one type of operation for if it's less than, greater than, equals, not equals, and something else. I can't remember. And then basically a slightly different one for greater than or less than, because that's got 2 comparison values. So I needed to have a slightly different mode of operations. But I basically had exactly the same thing, just with 2 different values from the cluster and with different data types on the wires, but essentially exactly the same, just for tons of different data types. So yeah, haven't figured out how to do that one yet. If anyone's a malleable VI's scripting master, then maybe I'll need to talk to you. Jazzy?
You all doing it to log the message of the assertion, or is it like really here you're evaluating the conditions? Because I was expecting at the beginning when you said that it's basically true-false decision, that you'll leave the decision to the user and just here store information whether it's okay or not okay. Because I can imagine thousands of different ideas what I would like to check, and not only comparing doubles, integers, or any other data types.
Yeah, so I've got some ideas for additional like checks that I would like to put in. One idea I've got is to, rather than having like a fixed way of comparing something inside the assert, having that as some kind of dynamic dispatch or some method that you can put in your own sort of configurable VIs in there to be able to change what the comparison is. But at the moment, I've just got a fairly fixed list of, for numeric data types, there's greater than, less than, equals, not equals, and a couple of others. For string, there's starts with, ends with, contains, and a few other things in there. And then it supports Booleans as well. But yeah, it's...
So this is all done by your API. So
yeah.
If I want to use it, I need to pass you the data and the kind of a comparison or operation I would like to do on it, and then this will be done inside of a Assert API.
Yeah.
I'm not passing just okay, not okay information.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Steve?
That's regarding scripting of malleable VIs. Scripting the malleable VI itself should be pretty straightforward. The only thing, and I think Darren would be able to answer that, is the actual drop process. If that would invoke the undrop Xnode event, if it does that, then scripting it and putting it in place should work just fine.
Malleable VIs are not Xnode based.
Not anymore?
They used to be, but they are not anymore.
So it's in the Xnode.
So a malleable VI is just a VI file on disk that has an extension of .vim. The file format is identical. So if you want to drop a VIM, you just call the new VI object and give it the path to a .vim instead of a .vi. There's no Xnode stuff that you get along with that.
Cool. Maybe I can do it then.
Now is the time to try it.
Okay, good. I will try it. What was I? Oh yeah, this is just another place where I've got lots of nested case structures for different data types and stuff. Next one is definitely a bug which I've tried several times to figure out. So I mentioned earlier on that one of the actions is to pause the VI, or pause the calling VI if an assert fails. This is my pause VI action, so you can see it has the VI name, gets the VI reference, hits pause, and then goes through and finds where gets the reference to the sub VI that matches the UID, and then highlights that object. I've played around with this a ton. Whatever I do, I seem to have, it doesn't pause on the actual object, it pauses on the object afterwards. And I just can't get it seems to highlight the right object because I've got the right ID, but always pauses on the wrong object, and I can't figure that one out. Has anyone tried doing something like that and had better luck, or had better method of doing it? No. James?
I mean, I haven't tried it, but the obvious thing would be if you've done the evaluation in the sub-VI, that means the sub-VI's... Oh no, but it's sat in that sub-VI. I'm trying to think, basically has that sub-VI completed execution, and that's why it's by the time it does that.
Yeah, I think it must have done, because it's the assert action stuff is in that sub VI. That VI is there, just a little dumb VI I made just to show this problem. So that would normally be the assert VI. That must have completed, and then therefore it's just pausing on the next thing and then going back and highlighting.
So I don't see, like, you're calling the pause VI on this VI with the while loop, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just going to pause at some random point, I think, while the loop is executing. So your scripting code over here is calling object highlight on the sub VI, and that's the very first thing that happens. But then the pause of the VI is what's causing it to be stopped on the plus. I would imagine that if you ran this again, you might see a completely different object be highlighted, because there's nothing telling the VI where to pause. It's just saying pause whenever you run this pause VI method, and that could be executing any of the nodes, I think.
It does always seem to be on the next thing after on the next bit on the wire after the assert VI.
I would say that the way this code is written right now, it is indeterminate where in the loop we're going to pause when you call the pause VI method.
So basically, I think what he's saying is if you're running another computer, it might be in another place.
Yep. Or run it again, yeah. Yeah, fair enough. Okay.
Pete? Why not just set a breakpoint on it?
Set a breakpoint?
Yeah, you can do that from scripting as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was just about to say.
On the next iteration. Yeah, if you set up a breakpoint on this sub VI, then this sub VI is already executed, because this is a code inside of the sub VI, so it will not stop on it. It will stop on it on the next iteration.
Yeah.
And this is not what you're really want to do. So I think this pause VI, which is really pausing on the next element, and I think it should always be a next element, because you really trigger the pause, but you need to finish execution of the sub VI, and then the VI is paused. So that is why the next element is ready. It could be random, because it's not always determined what will be the next thing that it's really executed, because if you have things in parallel, then you don't really know which one will be executed in which order. But I think that's actually the closest method you can get here, because you cannot pause on the VI which is already executed.
Yeah.
Peter, why don't you try pausing on the sub VI itself, like inside instead of on the caller? Just out of
I can try that. Yeah. I have the name in the private data, so I can easily change that. I think I'm just running out of time now, so I think we can carry on this discussion offline. One last thing I wanted to just mention is that some of the problems and holes have been fixed, and just like I think I saw the video, I didn't get to attend Darren's presentation at NI Week, but I saw his video of LabVIEW hooks, and we were talking about the traverse by tref. All that stuff in there basically got pretty much replaced by the tref find object by label, or whatever it's called. So that's an awesome function, which has been said many times today. The other thing which I wanted to ask for some help on is I've had a bit of a showstopper. I keep on getting this error, and I can't figure it out. So if anyone knows what's causing that error when I try and load my VI package build spec, then...
What version of the IPM are you using?
I think it started when I upgraded to the latest version.
So the version from I think it was from 2017, 2016 to 2018. They changed how the build specification and the packages get built because of malleable VIs.
Okay.
So that might be part of the problem. So I would go back to the previous version of the IPM that you were using and see if you can still open it there.
I've tried that, I can't.
No, because we stayed with 2014 and 2016 for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're still building on 2016, because the other thing that you have, the problem is that if you build with 2018, then people that are not upgraded and are using 2014, 2016 cannot open your packages anymore.
Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm getting told to get off now, so
Hey,
I
real,
will
real quick though,
wrap
I
up
do
there.
want to mention on the VIPM thing, I've gotten that error before and I've solved it because there is a log file nested in a really weird folder somewhere that tells you the errors that happen when it tries to load your VIPB.
Ah, cool.
And if you can't find it, maybe we can find it together.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks. So yeah, thanks for your ideas and discussion. I ran over time in the end, so wasn't too short. Yeah, if anyone does start using this and has any success stories, then let me know. I'd love to hear about them. Okay, thank you very much.